All right. Whenever I'm reading an article
Yes.
and I come across the P word, I always have to mock it so
Yeah.
that I'm still quoting the article, but I'm saying prostitution.
Yes.
Because you have to say it like that because it's a big danger word. Prostitution's going on in this area. And why do we not say
We
that?
don't say prostitution because it's a gross word. I don't just mean it sounds gross. It does. It's actually like an ugly sounding word, really. But because it is a very stigmatizing word, right? The term is sex workers. The term sex worker was created by a sex worker. Carol Lee, may her memory be a blessing, developed the term in the 1970s to talk about what exactly it is that sex workers do. It is selling sexual services as a form of labor, right? That's what sex work is in a nutshell. But, I think the flip side of that is when we talk about prostitution, it's such a heavily stigmatized term, like using the word prostitute, or a common one is the term prostituted women, isn't helping anybody. Are you more or less likely to respect someone if they're a prostitute? Are you more or less likely to respect someone and listen to them if they are a prostituted woman, right? So those terms are already sort of heavily stigmatized by society. There's an assumption that either you're a really bad, immoral, like hypersexual Jezebel, or the assumption that you're a poor victim who, was trafficked into this industry and can't get out, and you're not deserving of your own agency. You're not capable of making your own decisions, right? And those are really sort of the two camps that people tend to fall in when we talk about sex work as a concept. And that's why we don't like the term prostitution. It only has negative connotations to it. It's doing nothing to further the conversation. There is nothing effective from calling someone a prostitute from a harm reduction standpoint. All you're doing is feeding and enabling the idea that either you're a bad person and so you shouldn't be listened to, or you're a victim who can't be trusted. Those are the two camps. And that has just really been incredibly instrumental in the stigmatizing against sex workers, which I have gone on and on and on about at this point. But the stigma is what is keeping sex workers unsafe. The stigma is what is encouraging predators to target sex work communities. The stigma is what is encouraging police to dismiss claims when sex workers come forward about abuse allegations or fears of the community, right? That's what happens as a direct result of that. Even in in a non-specific sex work way, other people are still getting caught up in this, right? Like we all remember when the woman who was sitting at a bar in New York City was told she wasn't allowed to sit alone at the bar because she might be a prostitute. She looked like a prostitute, right? And so that is where that stigma has gone. So it's not even just to people directly in the sex work industry. That stigma has now gone into basically any woman, because there's an assumption that pretty much any woman could be a prostitute, right? And so we're really trying to cut back on that stigma. We're really trying to focus on human rights and dignity. And we can't do that if we're continuing to use outdated, highly misogynistic, and highly judgmental language. It's just not helping the conversation move forward in terms of how to keep people safe, how to engage in harm reduction, how to ensure that sex workers are included in labor rights movements, how to ensure that sex workers are afforded the same basic dignity that any human being deserves, right? So stop saying prostitute, stop saying prostituted women, please start saying sex worker. And if you yourself are a sex worker and the term prostitute goes for you, fine, you can use it for yourself. But to just call that, to put that on other people, it's really wildly inappropriate. Don't do it. It's rude. It's disrespectful. It's not helping anybody.
And, in my experience as like a consumer online and then like as a person, just a couple days ago, I met a new coworker and I was like, what's your pronouns? Mm-hmm. And they're whoop whoop. And what's your pronouns? Whoop whoop. And it's like, it's a form of politeness.
Yes.
It's good manners.
Yes.
Like I'm pretty sure a lot of folks that are that don't carry a great deal of melanin, they're challenged there, and they're like, you know what? As much as I like all the words to this song, I can leave the N-word part out and still jam to the song.
Yes.
Because that's good manners. And a lot of people might use other words, but let's try good manners.
Yeah, let's try good manners.
And as a consumer, I listen to cats that do like film reviews and whatnot. Mm-hmm. And like over time, and you hear them like 5 or 6 years ago, they're like, sex worker? Uh-huh. I say sex worker now, right?
Yes.
And like in now 2023, they're just like, okay, so now in this scene, the sex worker comes into frame from the left, and like they're just normal. It's a polite way to speak. Be decent.
Yes, because sex workers are people, and people deserve dignity. You know, it's very frustrating that's still like such a controversial take, but really sit down and think about it. When you hear someone say the word prostitute or prostituted woman, has it ever been in a positive light? Or is it like 99% of the time in a somehow negative, either about a victimization tale, about you're immoral, about you're broken, about you don't respect yourself, you must have had a bad childhood, all these tropes and all these stigmas. Like, how, seriously, sit down and think about it. When you hear someone talk about prostitutes, is it ever in a positive way?
And there's a degree of it of like talking about you like you're not in the room.
Yes.
Right. And
yes.
And I think it's so like, let's say the sex worker is the third party in the room, and two other people, A and B, are talking about them like they're not there. And by using prostitute, you're saying exactly what class of person we're talking about here. Like, yeah, they got mugged at the ATM, but a prostitute got mugged at the ATM, not a dentist.
Right, exactly. Yeah, it's there's a reason that the word is not used with positive connotation.
Right, and not a grandmother.
Yeah. Right. Which is also such an issue, because it views sex workers as like being incredibly like one-dimensional beings, but sex workers are as multifaceted as anyone else. Like, you can be a sex worker and a parent and a friend and a neighbor and a grandmother and a volunteer and, you know, like so many other things. Like, I know so many sex workers who are also, you know, teachers. They also work at, well, one of my dear friends is actually a professor, you know, but there really is that sort of thing that like once you're a sex worker, you're only allowed to be a prostitute. And it's like, no, you're still a person who does other things and has other interests. Like, you can still be someone who enjoys working out. You can still be someone who works in a food pantry. You can still be someone who knits hats for charity. Like, you don't get to not do those things once you become a sex worker, you know? And so it really is a very, I think, intentional way to limit sex workers and strip them of dignity and humanity, because then it's easier to talk over them. Because like I said, there's really, it falls into two camps, one being that you're immoral and you shouldn't be listened to because you're like a sinner, or that you're just a victim and you're so far victimized that you aren't trustworthy as your own narrator. You aren't able to assert yourself in the ways that you need. So we have to speak over you. One way or another, though, whether it's because you're bad or whether it's because you're a victim, you're not allowed to speak for yourself, and that's because you're a prostitute. And I would really like to get away from that and start using more inclusive language that actually respects the agency of sex workers and allows them to be in conversations about their own lives. Like, it's really dehumanizing that you're not allowed to participate in a conversation about your own life. People are making up laws and policies around you. People are creating you know, sort of like unspoken social rules about you, and you're not allowed to participate because you're a prostitute. I'm not a fan.
See, and that's what exclusion is. And so just this one simple step in language improvement is including folks into like the hegemony of humane citizenship.
Yes.
Right? Inclusion into the hegemony of humane citizenship.
Yes.
And one small step, a language improvement. All right?
Let's do better.
And yeah, pretty neat. All right, good closers. We always know how to close. We'll
ABC.
We'll do it live.